This day forward, it's going to be only America first. America first.
That was January 20, 2017. 8 years later, the world is multipolar, with emerging countries playing a greater role and the gap between the global north and south narrowing. In his second term, Trump plans to impose sweeping tariffs on imported goods and specific companies and countries. How does Mexico view this threat?
I'm convinced that the US-Mexico-Canada Treaty, this is important for the next President of the United States, President Trump, because this trade treaty is the only way to successfully face the economic and commercial competition with China.
Clearly, China's rise concerns the US, and other countries are leveraging this. China's dominance in global trade is a caution for the United States, and Chinese authorities believe it will continue.
Last year, the total value of imports and exports reached 43.85 trillion yuan, an increase of 5% year-on-year, setting a new historical record. China's position as the world's largest goods trading nation has become even more secure.
The US supports Taiwan's democratic interests while adhering to the One China policy. Taiwan's semiconductor industry is key to global supply chains, helping US companies stay competitive in technology and innovation.
Taiwan is confident that it will continue to deepen cooperation with the new government to resist authoritarian expansion and create prosperity and development for both countries while making more contribution to regional stability and peace.
Back in the US, Trump has pledged to end taxes on tips and overtime, to lower corporate tax rates, and to open federal lands to foreign companies and housing. He has also vowed to undo much of Biden's climate change work. But it is his use of tariffs as a key foreign policy tool that is disrupting markets.
Trump posted on Truth Social that he's going to create an external revenue service. That's going to be focused on collecting tariffs and really clamping down on companies that are selling into the U.S. From abroad. This really could be a problem for many investors, as tariffs will obviously push up the price of goods. There also could be retaliation from other countries. And so this is one of the reasons you've seen a lot of volatility in the markets.
While the US welcomes in a new administration, Trump's tariff threats could lead to supply chain disruptions, increased costs, economic uncertainty, and potential trade wars. The Economic Brief. And joining us is Dr. Rajat Kathuria, Dean of the School of Humanities and Social Sciences and Professor of Economics at Shiv Nadar University. Thank you very much, Professor Kathuria. Now, this is Trump's second term. He's been around for 8 years. Why is he being seen as unpredictable?
Well, because I think he's been seen unpredictable because he's made statements which are, I guess, not possible to implement in the near term. He says he's going to impose tariffs on China to the tune of 60%. He's going to impose tariffs on India to the tune of 20%. And like you said in your program, like one of the commentators said on the program, is that the moment you begin to impose such high tariffs, it's going to have a negative and adverse impact on the US economy itself. Remember, trade, you engage in trade because somebody else is better at doing something. And therefore, the benefits come to your country. And if you're trying to sort of damage those benefits, then it will result in something adverse within the economy. It could be inflation, it could be supply chain disruptions, and it could be, increased consumer spending. So there will be an impact on the Indian economy. And I think the American Treasury and the economic advisors recognize that these are going to be the implications of the campaign rhetoric, if I may to call it, on the American economy. And therefore, I think sometimes there will be, some of the policies might be implemented, but if the US goes the whole hog, I think it's not going to be sort of in their own interest to do so. So the uncertainty mark is how much of the rhetoric of Trump during the campaign is going to be implemented.
Indeed.
I think that's the uncertainty.
Now, India is the most natural counterbalance to China's influence in the region. It's been there for a long time. But to what extent are other countries, even those nowhere close geographically to China, willing to play this China card to get close to the US?
So I think, we haven't been here for the first time. This is probably the third or the fourth time that India has been held up as an exemplar or possibly another alternative destination other than China to house investments, to become a part of global value chains, etc. But India hasn't stepped up to the plate in some sense to be able to play that role, despite the fact that we have a very large market, we have very large scale that we can offer, just like China offers, but we haven't really stepped up to be able to occupy the position that China once occupied or continues to occupy, as you said in the program, of being the world's biggest exporter of goods. And now reaching, even as we speak, yesterday, there was a news report that China had reached a trade surplus of $1 trillion. That is enormous, which means that it is exporting, and it is probably the largest trading partner for over 100 countries in the world today. To therefore try and sort of change that supply chain is going to require more than United States. It's going to require more than India as an alternative destination. A lot of countries will have to come together. So I think the answer there, Mark, is if supply chains have to be relocated and whether countries are ready to play that role, they have to contend with the fact that China has sort of entrenched in final and intermediate good exports to over 100 countries, as I said, as the largest trading partner, and it's very efficient. Countries trade with China because it's competitive and the pricing makes sense for them. To be able to shift to alternative destinations will not only be a time-consuming process, but it could potentially also be a disruptive process. One will have to go carefully how we tread there. But the good news is that countries are beginning to come together, are wanting to come together to try and diversify, because putting all your eggs in one basket is not such a good idea. And with China, a lot of countries have actually put their eggs in the Chinese basket.
Sure.
So diversification is a good idea, but I think it'll still take time.
True, and we are seeing the emergence of a strong multipolar world as a result. Now, but Professor Kathuria, Howard Lutnick is going to be the Commerce Secretary for Donald Trump, and he's a billionaire. And they have so many billionaires in positions of power, this administration. One would expect business to thrive. Is that a logical conclusion, or is it even a true conclusion?
So I don't know whether one can draw a correlation between how a businessman is going to behave when he becomes the Commerce Secretary. But you remind me, Mark, of a wonderful article that a Nobel laureate wrote many, many years ago in an academic journal called Foreign Policy. And this academic was none other than Paul Krugman, who used to be one of the economic advisors, or supposed to be potential economic advisor in the Clinton administration. And he wrote a wonderful article exactly sort of trying to explain the point that you're making, or trying to provide an alternative. He says that somebody who's very good at running a company may not be the ideal person to run a country's economic apparatus. And likewise, somebody who's very good at running or being the chief economic advisor will not be the best person to be able to run a company successfully. So sometimes the skills that are needed for running a country, because a country is a system which engages not only within itself, but with the outside world. And it becomes a sort of a general, because I'll give you one example. A lot of people say that depreciating the rupee or the devaluation of the rupee would be good for exports. Yes, it would be good for exports, but it would also increase the cost of your imports. So therefore, you have to balance. Whoever is in power or whoever is taking those decisions will have to balance the sort of positives and the negatives and then arrive at a decision. And sometimes, people with the larger view are better placed to take that decision for the country as a whole.
Okay, we leave it We'll leave it there. Thank you very much, Dr. Rajat Kathuria. Thank you for joining us here on the Economic Brief and enlightening us on what to expect from the Trump administration.
Thank you, Mark.